and welcome. I'm Ankit Prasad of Republic TV, and I am currently at the Global Hospital in Lower Parel, Mumbai. We're about to speak to Dr. Amit Maideo at the endoscopy OT in the hospital. Now, Dr. Maideo has recently conducted a new procedure in an area that is a bit of a concern, a very large concern actually worldwide, and a growing concern in India, and that is obesity. Now, Dr. Maideo, thank you so much for speaking to us. Would you first like to tell us about this condition and what are the current ways to maybe handle it and the current techniques that are applied, and then we can maybe move on to the new procedure that you have recently conducted?
Obesity is a condition which is on the rise, not only in the world but also in our own country. And all of us know that obesity is just putting on extra fat on the body. Now, this is basically a disease of the human mind and also disease of the constitution. Sometimes it can be genetic, because of which too much of fat gets deposited. And what happens is, if compared to the height of the patient, if the body mass index, the BMI increases and the fat becomes too much, then it leads to further problems, like it starts affecting other organs of the body, like the patient starts getting diabetes, the patient has hypertension, cardiac problems. And more importantly, because their whole body gets disfigured, many of these patients, and they tend to go into a depression. And that depression further leads to a vicious cycle. They keep on eating more just to divert their mind, and that further increases the obesity. Now, obesity, till now we felt that in India is not very common, but it is growing so rapidly in the last few years that we are seeing it not only in the urban population like the main cities, but we are also seeing obesity in a very growing pattern even in the villages, even in our rural areas. Now, this is almost becoming like an epidemic, almost like and that is going to kill people as this obesity keeps on increasing.
Now, what is the reason for this rise in obesity in India? Is there any reason that you can spot, a trend that has made this the way it is in the last couple of years, maybe decade?
The prime factor of obesity is food. And the type of food, I think the changing patterns of food is going to be the main reason, if you ask me personally. Second is not only the type of food, but the people's lifestyles have changed. Especially in the urban areas, the lifestyles have become so hectic that people do not get sufficient time to eat food. There are very long gaps between two meals, and then one meal when they have a very heavy meal. Now, this causes completely improper metabolism in the body. So the deposition of fats, carbohydrates, proteins, where it is supposed to go, it doesn't go in the proper place. And then the fat starts getting deposited in various areas. Sometimes it also gets deposited in the liver. Patients develop problems like fatty liver, in addition to, of course, subcutaneous fat, because of which they look big.
Right. So we are working harder, but more haphazardly, and hence our lifestyle is being affected by that, and that is why obesity is on the rise. And so, what are the various methods that can be applied by a person to handle this, to sort of ensure that maybe they don't suffer all the ill effects that come along with obesity?
The prime thing, if you want to treat obesity, is to prevent obesity. So education is important, and right from the beginning, if parents educate their children to eat the right food at the right time, then these children are unlikely to become obese. But once obesity sets in, then it is a very difficult problem to tackle, because the first and foremost what one needs to do is exercise and diet. But in exercise and diet combination, people give more importance to exercise but not the diet. Actually, it's the other way around. You have so many athletes. We have athletes who have performed extremely well in their life, but the day they retire from their exercise, and even if they continue to do exercise, their eating pattern completely changes, and that makes them obese. So the diet is more important than the exercise. So the first thing what a person needs to do is to prevent obesity or to treat obesity is to follow a proper dietary regime, make sure, or at least know what are the healthy foods, what they should avoid, and maintain a routine level of exercise. I mean, one need not go to the gym every day, but at least maintain a routine, a normal working lifestyle where it is not sedentary. You are not sitting all the time. You should be at least walking, working out. There has to be calorie burning. But you know what happens? Once obesity sets in, no, this first factor of diet and exercise, very, very few people can actually follow it. First of all, the mind frame does not allow them to do it. They are not motivated enough. They are already very obese. They feel, oh, nothing is going to happen. Even if I go to the gym, it's going to take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Who's going to follow that regime, strict regime? And therefore, this method invariably fails. So then what happens? Then they start becoming obese, they start developing problems. And in the last 5 to 10 years, these new techniques of bariatric surgery have come up, where what surgeons do is, what happens is when you eat food, the food goes through the food pipe into the stomach. The stomach is like a bag. Now that food remains in the stomach for 3 to 4 hours. During that 3 to 4 hours, the food is getting mixed with hydrochloric acid, and then the food is pushed ahead in the small intestine for digestion. So what surgeons do, they do various techniques, but these are surgical techniques where they actually cut the parts of the body or the parts of the digestive tract, or they do bypass. So one of the few surgeries I will tell you is one they do what is called as a sleeve gastrectomy. That means initially they used to cut open the tummy, but nowadays they put telescopes from outside, which is called laparoscopic surgery. So they put laparoscopes, they go inside and they cut half portion of the stomach and they take it out and they put staples on it. So they reduce the stomach into a tube. That is one of the surgeries.
So for viewers to just add a little perspective, I think the doctor took an example of sportsmen. I think Diego Maradona, after he retired, he became obese and he went in for this kind of procedure. I think that was a long time back. That was recent. I think, so he went in for this kind of procedure. So the example completely holds true. The logic here is that it's not that you are making people thinner by removing the stomach, but you are actually reducing their appetite, because the stomach as a bag, it becomes smaller and hence people are able to eat less and maybe hold less food. That is the logic?
Yes, that is one of the logics. One is reduce appetite. Second is you feel full early, because now the size of the stomach is low, has become small. So even if you eat little bit of food, you feel satisfied. So you don't feel like eating more. Or if you try to eat more, you may feel a little bit distension, little bit of pain. But you know what has happened? This bariatric surgery has not stopped only to cutting of the stomach. What surgeons have started doing is little bit more advanced techniques, like they bypass the stomach. Normally, food goes through the stomach into the intestine through a part of the intestine called duodenum. And in that duodenum, now it gets mixed with juices like bile and pancreatic juice, where digestion takes place. Surgeons bypass that. They attach the intestine directly to the stomach. So the food goes directly in the intestine without getting digested. So what we are doing is we are actually creating a malnourishment in a healthy patient. So therefore what happens, even the surgery looks beautiful, there is a weight loss in the initial stage, these patients develop a lot of post-procedure complications. They have to be put on a lot of supplementation, a lot of vitamins, they have to lead a very restrictive lifestyle. Many of these surgical procedures where cutting, suturing and everything is done from outside, it leads to complications like leakages, and therefore patient sometimes needs to stay in the hospital for a long time. But you know what is happening? This bariatric surgery is also available or possible in only 2% of all the obese population. And the exercise and diet is another 4 or 5%. So there is almost a 85% group of obese patients where there was no treatment available. This was a big unmet need for obese patients. Now, this is now getting slowly solved by what we now call as bariatric endoscopy. So I'll just show you now, you know what, endoscope, we have been performing endoscopy since many years. Endoscopy is a telescope, flexible telescope, which we pass through the mouth, through the natural orifice, and from inside we can diagnose various diseases of the food pipe, stomach, intestine, etc. And we have been treating also through an endoscope. We can take out stones or treat bleeding or something like that. But in the last 5 years, we have started using this endoscope from inside by a natural orifice to reduce the size of the stomach. Now, this is going to meet that unmet need. So, this is that in-between area of obese patients, type 1, type 2 obese patients, who is the biggest chunk of obese patients who can now be treated.
So, we're talking about essentially putting a flexible telescope down a person's mouth into their stomach and conducting a procedure via that, instead of having to perform an incision into the stomach and a more invasive kind of surgery. But here what we have is an advancement that is allowing us to do something that a very large number of people potentially need. in a much less invasive manner. So now the doctor is going to show us what are the kind of tools that have enabled us to get to such a stage where we are talking about this.
See, first and foremost is this procedure need not be done in an operation theater. It is done in an endoscopy room where you are standing just now. So this is like an endoscopy suite where the patient can walk in. We just do the procedure. Patient can walk out. After he comes out of the anesthesia, he's lying for a little bit while a few hours inside the recovery room. And on the same day evening, that patient is walking around in the ward. Next day, the patient gets discharged. In a few hours after the procedure, the patient can be started on liquid diet. So this is how simple this procedure is. Though it is technically a little demanding, one needs to take training. But now if you see here, this is the endoscope. This is how the endoscope is. Now, of course, on this endoscope, I have attached this suturing device. But if you see this, see how this endoscope can be moved only by moving wheels. Now, this thing is happening in the stomach. I'm putting this endoscope inside the stomach, and from outside, by holding this endoscope shaft and by moving the wheels, I can move this endoscope in all different directions, in entire 360 degrees direction. And this is one. Now to this, at the tip of the endoscope, now I've attached this device which is called as a suturing device. So now what we are doing, the principle of this procedure which is called as endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty. So this is not gastrectomy. We are not cutting the stomach. It is like a bag. So we are plicating the bag from inside, by which that bag becomes smaller. And by taking internal sutures, we can reduce the size of the stomach by 50%.
Suturing is like sewing. It's a method like sewing, and you can do
like
suturing with just this small tip of this
Now you see
instrument
this.
here.
Now you see this. You see this needle coming here?
Right.
So you go inside, then pull the tissue of the stomach in between these two arms and click.
Right.
And then one more click, that thread goes through that wall. Pull the scope, go to the other side, another click, again release. And multiple areas, we can put that thread inside and then just tighten the thread. Right. So the whole stomach gets plicated from inside.
What is the condition of the patient at this time? Are they conscious?
Patient is under anesthesia because this procedure takes around 45 minutes to 1 hour. So for 45 minutes to 1 hour to tolerate the endoscope in the mouth sometimes becomes uncomfortable. Otherwise, you don't need anesthesia for this procedure because this is passed through the mouth. I mean, we are not doing any cut from outside. Neither it is a painful procedure. I mean, even if a patient is awake and if I take sutures from inside, it's not going to pain because the inner lining of the stomach does not have any nerve sensations. The nerve sensations are outside. So when I'm suturing the stomach from inside, the patient will not have pain. So this is the way we pass the scope from the mouth. We attach this device. Through that, there is a thread coming out. This needle is there. And one area by one area, we are just plicating. Right. Like this. Right. And at the end of the procedure, we just tighten the suture, take out the endoscope. The patient is reversed from the anesthesia. The procedure is over.
What kind of volume reduction does this cause to the stomach?
It depends upon the number of sutures we take, but normally we don't measure actually the volume. But when we look at it, it appears that around 40 to 50% of the stomach can be reduced in size.
And is there any loss in functionality of the stomach? Will the stomach behave and operate the same way?
That is the whole beauty. The whole beauty is that the stomach function remains normal. Why? Because we are not cutting it off. The nerves are normal, the blood supply is normal, the acid production is normal. So even if you have plicated it, that stomach is still mobile. The stomach is still moving. And therefore, the patient has least amount of symptoms after the procedure. I was actually amazed to see because I was fortunate to get trained by one of the world masters, Professor Galvao Neto from Brazil. And then just 3 days back, I performed the first endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty in India.
And tell us about that.
Well, she was a lady, a middle-aged lady, Maharashtrian lady who, compared to her height was only just less than 5 feet, but her weight was almost 90 kilos. And she was completely disfigured, and they were very fed up with that type of life. In fact, the issue is that why did she choose this therapy? Because few years back, one of her close relatives had undergone a bariatric surgical procedure. And in spite of that, after weight loss for a few months, that relative of hers, after going through that whole bariatric surgery, where that patient was in the hospital for almost 8 to 10 days, with pain in the tummy and putting on various medications. That patient was put on various supplements after the surgery. 3 years later, that patient regained weight. So they completely lost faith in bariatric surgery. I'm not saying that bariatric surgery is bad. In fact, that is presently the treatment for morbid obesity. In fact, that is the treatment if the patient is 120 kilos, 150 kilos, 160 kilos, where just by reducing the stomach by 50%, it is not going to make a difference. In those type of patients, we do need to make them malnourished. Otherwise, their body mass index is not going to come down. But this patient selected this procedure, even though she was the first patient to undergo it in the country. Right. And to my surprise, after I did the procedure, when I went to see her in the ward, she was sitting on the bed smiling. I had not expected that a procedure which took me 1 hour, where I was, for me it was difficult because I was doing it for the first time and I was plicating the stomach from inside. I thought that there will be at least some discomfort, that patient will be at least, we may have to give her some painkillers. But absolutely nothing. And then she's, I think, my biggest proponent for this procedure.
So you're saying the convalescence required is extremely small. It is how, in terms of time, how would you compare it to the regular bariatric surgery procedure?
See, bariatric surgery procedure, if you do a simple sleeve gastrectomy, then I think 2 or 3 days, at least 3 days, they keep the patient in the hospital. But if you do a procedure like bypass, anastomosis, or any big type of procedure, they are in the hospital for a little longer. They are on various medications, they are on intravenous drips, etc. Whereas in this procedure, I kept the patient 24 hours. But in the world experience, where around 4 or 5,000 such procedures are carried out all over the world, they discharge the patient on the same day. So in a few hours, the patient can be started on liquid diet and the patient can be sent home.
Oh, is that so? And so what is the post-op, in the longer term, what is the lifestyle of the patient? How is that affected? And are there any trade-offs? You say 4 to 5,000 surgeries have been conducted. What have been sort of the results of that?
See, the results have been extremely good. In fact, there have been some prospective trials conducted, multi-center trials, mainly from 3 main centers, one from Spain, one from the Mayo Clinic in United States, and one from Brazil. And in that prospective trial, they found that over a period of 6 months, that patient had almost a 20% total body weight loss. So 20% total body weight loss is huge. You know why? Because statistics have proven that even if you can have a 5% total body weight loss, you drastically reduce the chances or comorbidities like diabetes, blood pressure, and cardiac disease by 80%. So the chances that you'll develop any heart attack or you'll develop diabetes in the future are reduced by 80%, only by 5% reduction. And by this procedure, we can reduce almost 19%, almost 20% of total body weight loss. But as you rightly said, just by doing a reduction of stomach is not the end of the story. The patient has to be counseled. They have to maintain a proper healthy diet after the procedure. They have to do exercise regime. That is essential. And if they have to continue that. But you know what is the beauty? The beauty is after a few months, once the patient looks at themselves in the mirror and they find that their body has become slimmer, or for example, girls have started looking more beautiful, or men have started looking more handsome, that gives them tremendous motivation. And by looking at that, and other people, their friends, their peers, their relatives, they all telling them, oh, you are looking nice. You are looking much healthier than what you were before. That gives the motivation. Right. It is not just this procedure. Along with this procedure, the mind frame changes. The patient becomes positive.
Right. So on one hand, we have the ill effects of obesity, such as it's not just about how you look, it's also about the other comorbidity you said, the comorbidity it causes, that is diseases in other parts or conditions in other parts, versus what is being spoken of as a rather safe sounding procedure, and a procedure that does not require much convalescence, does not require much recovery time. How feasible is this in India? How long do you think this will take to catch on? Will it catch on? What is your view?
I personally don't think that it is too difficult. There are two limiting factors. One limiting factor is this device, because this device is imported. And so this device presently is little expensive. You know, the whole device, this gun by which we can fire that suture. So all this is a little expensive. But we are working out ways with the company, we are working out ways with the technique by which the present cost of this device and the entire procedure can be brought down to one fourth.
Mm.
For example, if it is costing 2 or 2.5 lakhs of rupees for this procedure just now, I think in a period of 4 to 6 months, we can bring down the cost to 50,000 or 60,000 rupees, which I'm quite sure even a normal middle class person or a lower middle class person can easily afford.
That's an astonishing drop in prices, if at all, that you are aiming at. What is the comparison vis-a-vis the existing procedure?
The existing surgery cost at least twice. For example, but it of course depends upon the type of hospital, depends upon the surgeon. But on an average, I feel that bariatric surgery costs anywhere between 3 to 6 lakhs of rupees.
All right, that's a big difference in prices. Is there any approval system for this? Are these devices approved? What is the
This device is now approved by the Indian FDA, and it is completely available. Import of sutures have still not begun. Presently, these sutures have been imported for the patient itself. But in a few months' time, I think all the sutures, the device is already available, but the suture material, it's a proline, it's a nylon type of a thread. So that thread is the only thing which is left now. Once that is approved in another 1 month, approved means freely available in another 1 month. I think many centers in the country will start doing this procedure. Because I can do this procedure, I think any other endoscopist will be able to do this procedure, because we are very soon going to start a proctoring program where we will other endoscopists from the country will come to me and I will teach them how to do it.
So what the doctor is saying is that that device, which I am sure took many decades of robotics research and medical research to come up with, is now relying on a synthetic fiber to become completely mainstream in the country. Thank you very much, Dr. Maidev, for speaking to us about this procedure. I hope it has served to educate a lot of viewers about what are the various means that can be used to combat obesity and the conditions that accompany it very often. And this new procedure does sound very exciting. Please do read up about it, find out more, find out what it is all about and why a person may or may not need it. Thank you very much. Along with video journalist Sunil, this is Ankit Prasad for Republic TV.